Today's guest on the Winning Teams podcast is Abdallah Aljurf, who is a consultant working with leaders in the Middle East. He's really experienced, both working in companies and working as a consultant to companies. So he's got a lot to offer and a very, very good perspective. And we really focused the conversation around leadership, the skills that you need to have, the pitfalls for new leaders coming into a role, things they should avoid doing and things that they should do. And also we talk about the integrity in leadership, what it means, the importance of it, and how you can make sure that you're demonstrating that integrity in everything you do. So really interesting perspective, comes from a different background in terms of the market that he's operating in, but it's a really, really fascinating area in terms of business growth and business development. And Abdallah is really very much at the forefront of all of that. So I really encourage you to sit back and listen to Abdallah Aljurf. Abdallah, thank you indeed so much for being with us here on the Winning Teams podcast. It's a great joy to have you here, and we've been trying to get this in the calendar for a while, so eventually we have made it. So thank you indeed for joining us.
Thanks to you.
It's great to have you here. Just maybe before we get into it, because I know you work with a lot of leaders and I want to talk about that, but maybe just give a little bit of background to yourself so that people who are listening have context.
Okay. I'm working in the field of leadership development and coaching. I have a background of HRD experience, human resources development, for the past 18 years. I've worked with many local and international companies, and I work with leaders around the world to coach them and make them the better version of themselves.
Very, very good. So, as you say, you work with a lot of leaders, and you've got a HR background. So a lot of the work that you would do with leaders is when they find themselves in new leadership roles, when they've got promoted or been appointed to a new leadership role. When you are working with clients in that who just moved into either a new role, moved into an organization in a new role, what are your kind of top three pieces of advice that you would give to somebody starting out and as they embark on that journey?
Okay. First, try to observe and understand the culture and the work environment. Try to identify who are the real leaders, the real decision makers, and who are the influencers who would influence their decisions. So this is the first advice. The second advice, I would say, hire a coach, because this will save you a lot of time and effort, because you will need to make so many decisions. You will need to think fast. So the coach here will play the role of a catalyst who would speed up your thinking and decision-making process. And the third advice is not to jump to conclusions. So especially in your first 90 days, don't jump to conclusions and don't make assumptions. Try to understand all points of view, trying to see the different angles for any decision that you want to make. So these are three advices.
Because there is pressure, isn't there, on somebody coming new in, because there's always kind of, if this is the new person joining, is the new kid on the block, and people are watching, people are observing, and you do feel that pressure that I've got to do something to make an impact. And really what you're saying is, just, resist that impact to dive in and start making change. Is that correct?
Exactly. So many leaders get drawn quickly to operations, and people look at them as a role model or someone who will help us or solve our problems, which is true to some extent, but it should not be your main focus in your first 90 days. At the beginning, you need to understand, you need to strategize, then results will come. If you go quickly to operations, then you'll never have time for strategic thinking.
Yeah, I think also is that you never get that early time back again, and
Exactly.
that, you know, and it's a very precious time. The other thing that I'm just curious as to your view on it, and one of the things that I find in the work that I do that's really, really important is, you know, agreeing with your, you know, your manager and making sure that you and your manager are on the same page in regard to what success looks like in, you know, 30, 60, 90, you know, 150 days. Is that something that you would advocate?
Yes. What success looks like, how often and how do you want us to communicate? What are your top priorities? How can I help? All of these things need to be agreed at an early stage between you and your boss.
Yeah. Why do you think that gets missed very often?
Again, people go quickly into operations. They get dragged because they have a team who's desperate, or a team that have been waiting for long for a new leader to come. So as soon as you, as a new leader, come to the new place, people will come to you, bombard you with their questions, their problems, their issues, their approvals, and you need to hold on and look at the big picture and see, what are my priorities here? What's the purpose of this organization, and why did they bring me at the first place? So you will have to balance between the operational issues and strategic thinking and strategic goals of your organization. When you have this balance, your real value as a leader and as an executive will be noticed among the board of directors or your team members. They will say, this is a strategic guy. He's not just another problem solver or a doer with a fancy title.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. And, you know, I mean, you talk about, you know, which I think is really good advice of kind of not rushing in to do things, and, you know, and what others that you were saying there. What do you see are the pitfalls that, you know, that new leaders kind of can easily find themselves in if they're not careful?
If they are not careful, they might be dragged into arguments that they could avoid at the first place. They could be dragged to focus on little tiny bits and pieces of several problems that their subordinates bring on daily basis. They could lose the focus on the vision. So always keep in mind, where is my North Star? Where is my vision? Where am I going? Why am I here at the first place?
Yeah, and I think it's important. When the work that you've done, I'm always curious to ask people this, but with the work that you've done, you've worked with a lot of leaders and in lots of different organizations in different environments. And I'm just curious, what do you see that high-performing leaders do that others don't do?
Okay, that's a great question. Well, many leaders think and listen carefully to their subordinates, to their team members. Some leaders, unfortunately, have this ego, so I know everything. I don't need to ask. I don't need to listen. I'm the Mr. Know-it-all. And your team members will notice from day one what kind of leader are you, because they will immediately compare you to your the previous leader who was either in the same position or another leader that led them before you do. That's why, as a good leader, you need always to ask, to clarify. Don't build on assumptions. Even if you think you know the answer or you know the solution to a certain problem, ask some more probing questions until you have clarity about the root cause of the issue. Then when you bring a solution, everybody will say he has done his homework. He knows what he's talking about, instead of just making some assumptions and jumping to conclusions.
And when we talk about leadership, we often, we often hear the word integrity being used.
Yes.
And very often what people are looking for in a leader is that integrity. And from your work and from your experience, Abdallah, what do you define as leadership integrity?
That's a great question. This takes me back to an old story when I was 14 years old. And I learned integrity the hard way. When I was in our intermediate school, some of my friends said, let's go and take some snacks from the closed snack bar. And there was a tiny window. And this tiny window barely allows only one person to sneak in and get to the snack bar. And guess who was that thin person who went to the snack bar through the window? I did.
Right.
So when I got all of the snacks and passed them to my friends, we enjoyed our time. But the next day, our school principal decided to give me an award. So he brought a long, thick wooden stick, started hitting my hands one after the other. It was a great punishment and a great lesson. On the same day, he said, in our school, integrity is doing the right thing, even if nobody is watching. See, I remember his words until now because I learned it the hard way. But I discovered when I joined many organizations and dealt with so many leaders that not only in our school, also in the school of life, integrity is doing the right thing, even if nobody is watching. So that was a lesson for me. And since then, I've been trying to demonstrate integrity wherever I go, no matter who am I dealing with.
Yeah, very, very powerful. We're always talking, excuse me, but with leaders and people, as leaders, and many of them they lead teams, but you don't have to have a team in order to be a leader. But it's all about driving performance and optimizing the potential of people to achieve performance. And I'm just interested, Abdallah, in terms of when we talk about peak performance, what's your definition of peak performance?
If we are going to put it in a corporate context, I would say peak performance would be simply exceeding your KPIs. But that's not the whole story. This is just one part of it. You might exceed your targets or your KPIs by sneaking around or cheating or doing wrong things. So the other part comes, which is competencies. So you have leadership competencies that you need to demonstrate as a leader. You have the core competencies to demonstrate as a part of a certain organization. And you have the technical or functional competencies that you need in a certain role. Usually when you go up the ladder, the focus is more towards leadership competencies. Things like how do you motivate people? How do you think strategically? The level of your emotional intelligence. How clearly do you communicate with others? Your ability to move people and inspire them to get certain results. So as a leader and as you move up the ladder, you need to focus more on building up your leadership competencies, in addition to ensuring that you get your KPIs right and you exceed your targets. Having this combination will take you to the peak performance.
Okay. And from your personal perspective, I mean, I know that you've worked with many organizations, but what is it that drives you?
That's a tough question. Simply, I would say my grit, So grit is a combination of perseverance and passion. And as Angela Duckworth says, always start with passion.
Mm.
So I have passion for leadership development and coaching. And whenever I face issues in a certain organization or with a certain leader, I don't give up. I either come to him from different angles, or I look for another leader who could support me and support my decision. So simply put, I would say passion and perseverance.
Yeah. By the way, you referenced Angela Duckworth's book. It's a great book on grit. I must say it's one that I would always go back to, because I think it's a really, really powerful, and I think it's an incredibly important ingredient for all of us. You know, irrespective of kind of the role we have, or whether it's in a professional or in a personal capacity, I think it's massively important. Abdallah, before we wrap up, two questions I ask everybody. One is a book that you have read, or maybe are reading, that's had an impact upon you, and what is that book, and what was the impact?
Okay. If you are referring to a management book, I would say The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Stephen Covey, yeah.
Yes. Since I read that book, I've been always keeping the 7 habits, the 7 habits in mind until they became built in. So now I don't think, oh, now I should think win-win. I do it automatically. Oh, now I need to prioritize because Stephen says, first things first. Now I do prioritization on daily basis and on weekly basis, following his methodology. So this is a book that really affected my life positively. I became more productive, more effective in my life. And wherever I go, I carry with me either a notebook, a diary, where I put all of my goals and priorities, or I use my mobile phone.
Right, yeah. And you were saying, was there another book that you had in mind?
Well, I would recommend the books of John Maxwell. Any book for John Maxwell in the field of leadership will give you another perspective, will give you some inspiration that will help you as a leader wherever you are.
Oh yeah, I'm a great fan of. I do like John Maxwell's material, but I must say I really connect with Stephen Covey, and I think that, I mean, I don't know how long ago it was written, but it was written quite a long time ago. But you know, it's still so relevant, and I think that so much of what we see in the whole area of both personal development and leadership development, you know, has its origin in the 7 habits, and I think it is absolutely so foundational. So I would agree with you, the impact. The other question that I have, sorry, go on.
One more thing, for corporate leaders, I would highly recommend The Leadership Challenge by Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner.
Yeah,
because it's evidence-based, research-based, and whenever they come up with a new edition, it supports whatever was said or mentioned in the previous editions. So it is time-tested, and it has a solid methodology, and it's applicable. So it's not just a theoretical book or just a book about leadership stories. No, it gives you some behaviors that you could start working on. There are 5 practices of exemplary leaders that are in that book. So I wouldn't tell you what are these 5. I'll keep it for your audience to read the book.
It's an excellent book as well. I'd agree with you. I think it is really powerful. The other question I ask is daily habits, because I'm always curious what people's habits are, because I find that, you know, with successful people, they tend to have rituals. They're all different, but the rituals that really set up their day or close down their day. And just wondering what yours are, Abdallah.
Okay. I have so many rituals. I'll give you one of them, which is, I believe it will make sense to the audience, which is waking up early. So every day I wake up before 5 a.m. Now, when you wake up early, you could do so many things. You could read, you could exercise, you could meditate, you could pray, you could write, you could prioritize. You could do so many things. And by 7 a.m., so just in 2 hours, you will accomplish so many things, and other people are just starting their day. There is an entrepreneur who said, what you could do between 6 and 9 is triple what you could do between 9 and 6.
Yeah. No, yeah. So, I mean, when you do that, what do you spend that time doing? What is it that you do during that time that really sets up your day?
Well, every day I do something different, but most of the days I focus on reading.
Right. Okay. So that sets you up. Abdallah, this has been great. Thank you so much for joining us. Where can people reach you? We'll put everything in the notes, but if they're listening right now, where can they reach out and connect with you?
On LinkedIn.
Okay.
My account is simply linkedin.com/n/Aljurf. Aljurf is my family name, Aljurf.
Okay. Well, it'll all be in the notes. Abdallah, thank you so much for joining us today on the Winning Teams podcast. It's been a joy to have you, and look forward to catching up soon.
Thank you so much.